record. Hello, everybody. You're watching TRANSBRATIONS. I'm your host, Nahshondion. Thanks for joining us. Today's special guest is Jennifer Baker. Jennifer Baker is a publishing professional of 17 years. She's the creator and host of the Minorities in Publishing podcast and a contributing editor to Electric Literature. In 2017, she received a NYSCA Fellowship and a Queen's Council on the Arts Newark grant for nonfiction literature. Her essay, What We Aren't, or The Ongoing Divide, was listed as a notable essay in the Best American Essays 2018. In 2019, she was named Publishers Weekly Superstar for her contributions to inclusion and representation in publishing. Jennifer is also the editor of the All PLC short story anthology, Everyday People, The Color of Life, published by Atria Books in 2018. Her young adult novel, Forgive Me Not, will publish with Putnambooks for young readers, a division of Penguin Random House. Her fiction, nonfiction, and criticism has appeared in various print and online publications. Her website is jenniferbaker.com. Jennifer, thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be able to talk to you and see you in this whole pandemic madness. And thank you for TRANSBRATIONS. It's a great celebratory space.
Thank you, thank you. And how are you doing today?
I'm good. We're both in the city, so it's rainy, cold, like windy. So I think we're both blessed to be able to have a space to be.
We definitely are. And to be able to communicate effectively. Right?
Right. You are all about that. I have the greatest respect because Nahshon and I are very similar, just like, let's just keep it real.
And Jen, let's keep it moving forward.
Yes, more importantly.
Let's keep it moving forward. I want to just acknowledge the world is overpopulated with them. And since we all have them, it's important to acknowledge them. I require all of my guests to repeat after me. Hi, haters.
Hi, haters.
Hello, haters. Thank you for joining us.
Best revenge is the paper, right?
No, you know what? No, I think I'm starting to lean more towards its happiness. I mean, no.
Ooh.
That paper is good. That
Right. You can have both.
Yeah. I think it's definitely it's happiness. It's being able to smile and yeah. So
and not even thinking about them either. So
what was Merriam-Webster's word of the day? And have you used it?
Oh, I get that every day and I did not look today.
Did you yesterday?
I think, what was it, like transcendence or something like that yesterday? Really? Or maybe that was sometime this week. Oh. Because I get it, but then I have 8 different email accounts. So one goes designated to Merriam-Webster's, and I'll look at it like every 3 days, and I'm like, oh, those are interesting, or oh, I know that word.
You said you have 8 email accounts?
Yes.
Okay.
I designate them each for different things.
Well, I've got a dozen for my multiple personalities and to juggle men.
I mean that too. That it makes sense, right? Like when I see people and they say this is my email and it has like 2,000 unread emails, I said I don't understand how that happens, but it's because they might have 1 or 2 accounts and I have a bunch of accounts for different things. You
want to keep certain things separate and
exactly.
And is it okay separate but equal?
Well, some are more equal. Like the one you and I correspond on, that's the one I check. That's the one I want people I know to have. Oh. And then they're the ones where I have an account where that's the one I do online shopping. So I get all the spam there. And then I have one that's tied to my website, which used to be my primary and now is my website. So I check that frequently, but not as frequently. And then I have work related ones like from my jobs. One for my podcast, and then the one where the Merriam-Webster was an account that I used to apply for jobs to. And so I would just put that. So I usually, it's like, that's what I recommend to people, just to keep your lives organized is, if you have these different accounts, like you might say the shopping account, I don't really have to check like that, but the job application one I check once, twice a week, the personal one I check every day. you know, stuff like that. And like you said, maybe you have a dating one. Maybe you have like, this is where I send dudes to, or this is where I send partners or whatnot to.
Or the haters too.
Right, right.
Or the unwanted. So yeah.
Right, right.
What do they call it? The slush pile?
Yes, yes, you can have a slush pile, you know. Absolutely. Absolutely.
You have that slush pile. How were you introduced to literature? And do you remember the first book you read that left an impression on you?
My family, the women in my family in particular, are big readers. So my grandmother, my mother, my aunts, big time readers. The men in the family, they read, but they really read newspapers. So I feel like sometimes, at least when I grew up, there was that at least gender divide in terms of who appreciated literature in a very big way and who was like, okay, on occasion would go to literature, but really went to like visual mediums. And I think that's something in publishing we see a lot more is like women that, like, per market research, women tend to be the more like the bigger readers in terms of that. So that was how it was, because my mom's huge into books, my grandmother, all that stuff. And my aunt, one of my aunts, she helped teach me to read because she would look after me while my mom was at work. And before I went to school, she was helping me with my letters, the alphabet and all that stuff. So I was learning to write and read before I got into kindergarten. And so that they have a big impact on that. And they always supported me wanting to pursue it, because then I was like, I want to be an artist, or I want to be a writer, or I wanted to be a doctor for a little bit. But I always stuck with that. And I'd say like Mufaro's Daughter, because I was big into Reading Rainbow, as many of us were back in the day. So LeVar Burton, they stuck me in front of the TV, like, you know, 1, 2, 3 Contact, PBS was a big thing in my life. Sesame Street, you know, all that.
Is that when you started showing your colors?
Maybe. I just loved, like, you know, they plop you in front of the TV. They're like, all right, do that. Look at that for 2 hours. You're like, okay. But it was educational TV, or it was,
it was.
Yeah. So I enjoyed it, and so I remember a lot of my childhood is remembering a lot of LeVar Burton introducing me to a lot of children's books, some of which are problematic, like that we know now, but not all of them. But Mufaro's Daughters, I have that on my shelf over here somewhere.
I'm not familiar with that, or I don't remember it, or I don't recall it.
Oh, it's a beautiful picture book. It's kind of based on a fairy tale. Basically, it's two sisters. One's just a brat, and the other one is pure and sweet. And it takes place in Africa. And you know, the illustration, the person who wrote it and illustrated as Black, God rest his soul, John Steptoe, who had an award named after him by the American Library Association. And his children have kept his vision alive and his legacy alive. And it's just beautiful. It's like these 2 Black girls with braided hair in Africa. They have, you know, brown skin, like brown skin like yours. So they're not like super light or anything like that. Like it really is. And the details are there. So it's a beautiful book.
Have to check it out. What year was it published?
In the 80s, I'm not sure when, but it's called Mufaro's Beautiful Daughters by John Steptoe.
Okay.
It's really good. It's Black. It's very Black.
Blackity Black. I just wanted to say, I didn't sleep that much. I'm so excited to be interviewing you. Like this is just, I'm very excited. I'm just very excited. You said kindergarten. That's when you kind of knew you wanted to be a writer or artist?
Thereabouts, yeah.
That's kind of young to already realize that.
I just got a lot of support because I loved books.
Were you the only child?
Yes.
Okay.
Does that explain a lot?
Yes, Jen, it does. We met in June of 2016 on the Lower East Side at a function for Lambda Literary Foundation.
Yes.
I don't remember what the function was for. I know it was tied in with Lambda Literary. It might have been Lambda Literary and Pen America. I'm not sure.
I think it was both of them.
It was both. Right, it was. And you were one of the nicest people that was present, and we chatted quite a bit, or we chatted for a while.
Yeah, you were chatting with William, and I remember meeting you. Yeah.
I don't remember really anyone else from that event other than you and William. That same week, you invited me on your show, Minorities in Publishing podcast, your podcast, and you had emailed me and you had said, thanks so much for checking the podcast out and reaching out initially. Let me know what you think, and regardless if an interview happens or not, please keep me posted. Please keep me updated on how you're doing and your work. I want to keep cheering you on. I'm on my way to Florida for Bona. I'm doing fiction with Tayari Jones. She's great. Worked with her before. If you ever venture into fiction, she's the best. It will totally shed light on your work and structure issues. You also said, it's so important in this industry to keep writers, especially marginalized ones, motivated to keep going and not to have to push past the BS. When and why did you create Minorities in Publishing podcast?
I think it's 2014, where me and a former coworker, also a person of color, she worked in publicity and I worked in book production and publishing, just said we wanted to have a discussion with people who worked inside the industry. So for people who are aware, like yourself, We Need Diverse Books had started in May. Mm-hmm. And so people were very much looking at the need for more representative creators. Mm-hmm. And in terms of all backgrounds, not just being a person of color, all that stuff. But my colleague and I, we said, well, it would be nice if we talked about the industry, because you can't get one without the other, because it's all circuitous, right? Like if there aren't more representative editors acquiring the book and helping edit the books, and agents and publicists, marketers, salespeople, booksellers, like we need it all. So we wanted to create a podcast that let people know that these people in the industry exist, but we are the minority in the industry. And that's how part of the name came from, whether people like that or not. It is talking to the point that, like, in this industry, we are minorities, not that we are minorities in any other sense of the word.
How has the community responded?
Very well. I mean, you know, Nahshon, like when you create something like this where it's a conversation and you want people to be introduced to people in a way that they may or may not be aware of, I think we're not doing this because we're expecting money. And we're not doing it because we're expecting prestige or anything. Like, we're doing it because we want to connect with other people in a real way. And so when I think that's your intention, anything that exceeds that is a good thing. So for me to know that, see my podcast on lists where people say this is one of the best book podcasts, you should listen to this, or where people have come up to me and said, your podcast let me know that I wasn't alone, or your podcast showed me the possibilities, or your podcast gave me a platform, or you as an interviewer made me feel safe.
And you have, you've recorded how many episodes?
115.
And do you do this weekly or monthly?
It started bi-weekly, and then I went monthly probably 2-3 years ago.
Yeah, I'm definitely not doing this for money. And I just have to say that I'm actually tired of counting money. And I didn't realize it was such a job and a chore counting money. I'm doing this as my background's TV and film production. I'm a writer. I know a lot of artists and just people, period. So we're in the middle of a pandemic still. It's a great way to keep in touch. It's a great way to offer support, have something productive to do. You know, if money comes, that's great. But everything you do in life should not be approached with the idea of, I'm going to make some money from this. I mean, nothing is wrong with that. But,
exactly,
you know, sometimes you will get greater joy out of doing something that you just enjoy versus thinking about, well, I'm not making any money off of it, so what's the point? Why would I put energy into that? Like, I don't have that type of thinking. So, you know, I don't operate that way. During our interview, it was episode number 43, we discussed receiving funding and various forms of other support for our writing and being grateful. And I just want to say, for the record, I haven't been applying for any grants or anything, so nobody has to worry about that. You said as a teen that you were student council president and started receiving accolades. Other kids noticed and said, damn, she keeps going on stage to get awards. Your best friend even told you that you got everything. And I thought that was so hilarious to me. And you know, again, I didn't know that you were already preparing yourself for this role, you know, since kindergarten. So now that I know that, I'm not surprised, Jen. I'm not surprised
Really?
you're sitting in this position. No, I'm not surprised at all. Not surprised at all. How did receiving awards affect you? Did it validate you? Do you feel that it prepared you for the opportunities and success that you now have?
I'm not sure because I don't know if I was told this so much as I perceived it, was that in order to get anything, you have to over excel, right? Like the old saying or current saying of we have to be twice as good to get half as much or whatever. So I just knew I wanted to excel because I didn't come from a rich background. Like my mother was a single mother. We dealt with homelessness, we dealt with food insecurity, we dealt with a lot of things at certain points. And some days a lot, like most of my life we were stable, but there were times when we were not stable. And so I knew that there were things that I needed to do to try to secure certain things in my life. And so I don't know if it's validating, but maybe it is. Maybe it's like, yeah, I made sure I was on honor roll every year to be able to get these awards, to be able to get this scholarship, to be able to get a job. And I thought the world just worked very easily like that, not without hard work, but understanding it is not that easy for everybody. And that I still have privilege, even in what I've achieved as a Black woman, that there are things that, you know, being able-bodied and, you know, being heterosexual and cisgender, like there are things that I have a privilege that also did make it easier for me.
Now, let me ask you this. At what age did you realize that you had a command of the English language?
Probably, yeah, pretty young. Like once I nailed down writing.
What age were you on the first, what year, what age?
Probably like 8 and 9. Oh, you know what it was? You know, Nahshon, there was this, and I don't know the age, but I remember the grade. And I think it was like 2nd or 3rd grade. I remember, no, I think it was like 4th or 5th now. I was definitely in elementary school. And I had missed a report. I thought, you know, remember we used to have to do book reports when we were kids. And I missed the date or something like that. And I was usually always on time with my things. And I freaked out because I was like, oh my God, I didn't do the book report. So over like in an hour, I like quickly scribed like this book report. And I was just like, because usually I was like that nerdy kid is like, mom, check my homework and and I have to do it early but this time I was like frantically writing during, like before we were going to go to school, before I had to get on the school bus at the kitchen table at my grandmother's house, writing it. And then I gave it in and it's this sloppy mess. It's not even because I was just ridiculously nervous. And I got an A on it.
You don't remember what it was about, do you?
It was about some book, like a book I got from the Scholastic Book Fair, but it was literally, you know, book reports were literally what happened in the book back when you were a kid. Like it's what happened. And so I was just like, and I wrote it and I got an A and I was like, wait, I got an A on something I wrote in like 30 minutes over a bowl of Cheerios? Like what?
Maybe it was those Cheerios had an effect on you.
I don't know. And so I think that just let me know that it's like, okay, you can do this. You don't, it doesn't have to be perfect all the time. It doesn't have to be I mean, I feel differently now, but.
Right. Well, you're an editor now, so yeah.
Yeah. But that just gave me the confidence to be like, I guess I know what I'm talking about when I need to write something.
You did, yeah. I don't have to tell you that. I wouldn't have you on the show. Do you ever wonder where some of those individuals were at who took issue with you receiving all of those awards? You kept going on stage. Do you ever wonder?
No, I didn't get any pushback. I think people were just like, oh, okay. Like she obviously did the thing. And then there, you know, it
wasn't that
like,
type of
I didn't know any of any haters personally.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, so they were, okay, so I'm sorry. Edit. They were not haters. They were just.
They were commenting on it.
They were just like, that is the correct.
Girl, damn. Like even my friend at the time, I had said something where I was like, well, why didn't I get that award? And she said, you get all the awards. And then it made me have to think about it because I'm like, okay, you're right. I don't need to get everything. So you should.
Is it okay if I put a word in their mouth or two?
Sure.
Like, I mean, can we get one? Is she gonna take them all? Damn,
right,
Jen.
exactly.
Damn, Jen.
Yeah. And I was like, you know what? I'm there you go. Okay.
but Jen, that's what happens when you do the what?
Yeah, most of the time.
That's what happens.
Not all the time.
That's what happens. No, doesn't happen all the time, but it's a possibility that can happen when you do the work.
Yes.
Simple as that.
Yes.
It's as simple as that. So this is my second time interviewing you. The first was for Lambda Literary for the anthology of short stories, Everyday People, that you edited, but our interview was never published. And I don't remember quite why. I don't remember why it wasn't published, but I do remember that that's when the whole issue with Junot Diaz came up, and he was pretty much canceled that year. And I remember that I think he was taken out of the anthology, correct?
Yes.
He was edited.
We removed his story. Yes.
Was canceled. Yes. So that stood out in my mind because that was the first time that I interviewed you, and I was disappointed that it wasn't published for whatever reason that I don't remember. And I was kind of surprised because Alexander Chi is in the. Yeah,
there were several people who openly identified as queer in that collection.
Yeah, so I was kind of scratching my head, even though they're very selective on what they, publish in interview-wise, whatever.
I understand.
So in your introduction, you note the original editor for the short story collection was Brooke Stevenson, the Brooklyn writer and founder of the Rhode Island Writers Colony, who died in 2015. How did you get involved with that project?
So Todd Hunter, who was an editor at Atria, which is part of Simon & Schuster, the larger publisher, he and Brooke had worked on the project, and they still wanted to do the project. So Todd, I believe, co-collaborated with Brooke on it. So it wasn't as though Brooke owned the project, but they both collaborated that they wanted to create an anthology. And it was supposed to be all black anthology of stories. And so based on my reputation due to the podcast, as well as other things, because that's part of it, like the podcast got me opportunities, as well as, just helping other people gain visibility. He approached me and said, oh, let's have dinner because I have a project I'm interested in talking to you about. And so then when I reached out to him and thought about it, and I said, okay, I'll do it, but I would like it to be like a Black, Indigenous, and people of color collection. So not just Black. I wanted to incorporate other ethnicities.
Oh, okay, because that was going to be my question. If it was initially all Black, how did it go from Black to people?
Yeah, that was my idea.
Okay, great, thank you. So some of the proceeds from the sale of Everyday People benefited the Rhode Island Writers Colony, a nonprofit organization founded by Brooke Stevenson that provides space for speculation, production, and experimentation by writers of color. Have you been a writer in residence there? And is the colony still operating?
The colony is still operating. Jason Reynolds, along with John Stevenson, who is Brooke's older brother, are basically helping maintain it to this day. And they take applications annually. Obviously, due to COVID, they have not. But they did have people there in 2019. And I have not been there as a resident. I have applied once and when Brooke was still alive, but I didn't get in that particular year and I didn't reapply. I've gotten other residencies, but not that one. And just to convey, like, royalties are going to the Rhode Island Writers Colony for that project. So book royalties, like you said.
Sustain the colony, correct. You have 20 years experience in the publishing industry with an emphasis in book production and managing editorial. You're a writer, editor, and host of a successful podcast and a newsletter. How do you make time for all that writing and function at such a high level? Is it easy for you?
Not at all. Not at all. It's now that I'm an acquisitions editor, it gets a little bit tougher because that is not a job that has like a finite amount of time. Like even today, it's a weekend. I'm going to be working, editing manuscripts for my full-time job. But for the past 2 weekends, I've been dedicated time to edit my book. So it's really constantly kind of navigating a bunch of to-do lists, personal, professional, creative ones, to figure out where I can put that time and make sure, like, at my full-time job, the work is getting done and the authors who are working with me are prioritized and getting what they need from me, as well as making sure I'm getting what my editor needs from me for my book or books, and that I continue to work on other projects as they come. So I think I'm in a constant state of what needs to be prioritized. And that's what I do.
Do you speed read? Do you, or would you consider yourself a speed reader?
For submissions, yes.
Submissions.
Yeah. I need to really sit with the book. So with submissions, like even considering if you want to buy the book, like you might speed read it initially just to see if you want to keep reading. And if you know you don't want to keep reading, then you kind of stop. Further, if you speed reading, you're like, you know what, I do want to read this. Let me go back to the beginning, take some time to see how this story progresses. So in that way, a lot of editors that's how they try to figure it out. Like they might like the first half and then they're like, okay, let me continue. Or they're like, I don't like the first 5 pages. Maybe they'll skip ahead and see if it gets different, if things change or it gets improved. But usually people have like a page count when they're looking at submissions of, okay, this is how far I'll give this. If it's not really speaking to me by this page number, I'm going to stop.
Okay.
But in terms of like books that I really want to read, I tend to sit with those, and I'm similar. Like if I'm not liking the book after 50 pages, I'll stop reading it.
Do you get with all of this, brain activity, this reading and writing and editing and organizing and processing and thinking, do you get overwhelmed? Do you ever have like brain freeze?
Not brain freeze, but I had eye strain. Me and a lot of editors have been complaining about eye strain during the pandemic and looking at a screen for so many hours in the day because we're not getting the breaks or giving ourselves the breaks because you're not traveling, you're not able, not a lot of people are printing stuff out. So everyone's doing stuff on a screen for the past 2 years straight. And so that creates eye strain, which actually can be painful. I don't know if people know that.
Before the pandemic, you were providing me with editorial feedback on my manuscript shooting range. And then I started working on a book proposal. And you suggested editor and writer Todd Hunter. I didn't know him, but I was familiar with him. And that worked out great. And then you were unavailable for editorial feedback. And again, you suggested Todd Hunter for editorial. What do you recall like things being like before the pandemic started?
Oh, okay. I traveled a lot. And I think you knew that too. Like,
right.
The way busyness has changed for me is that I'm not traveling. I'm just home, like editing a lot versus before I was traveling for events, and I still had a full-time job. I was working Monday through Friday at my job, and I would get requests to be at conferences or do presentations, which were paid. And then like I might be at work and then on a Friday night, take a plane or a train to another state and do a presentation over the weekend and then leave and try to be back at work for Monday. So I remember doing a lot of traveling before the pandemic, and I've traveled on a train that's not been too far, but like I was taking planes. I was in Germany. That was like the last big trip I took before the pandemic was, I got a all expenses paid trip to Germany for a publishing event. And that was so fun and great. And then I had all this stuff for, Black History Month, because they love us during Black History Month. So I had a bunch of local events in New York City on February 2020. And then I had a lot of stuff planned for like late March, April, and then boom. So I just remember being constantly
busy,
like moving.
How has the pandemic affected you?
It's definitely, like amplified my stress, which I don't think I don't think I realized how you could still be so stressed and be stationary. But, when you watch what happens in this country, when you watch us having a president that really doesn't know how to navigate a major global catastrophe, and you see how we're being treated, how no one cares, how people don't want to wear masks, the most basic thing, like that amplifies your stress, and you just want to be alone, but also I need people. Like I do need to be sociable. Like I am a sociable person. I do feed off of that. So it's been rough. Like my family's safe, and I have not, to my knowledge, gotten COVID. I've been healthy. I haven't tested positive for it. I'm vaccinated. But yeah, and I've been employed luckily the whole time. So I didn't lose a job. I gained another job during it. So I've just been lucky, but mentally it takes a toll. And then physically that takes a toll.
Do you feel like people are offering each other enough emotional support during these difficult times?
I think they're trying.
They're trying.
I think they're trying. I think we're all stretched to a very bad limit and don't know how to get back to what things were. But the question becomes, was 2019 prior to that better? Like in some ways, yes, right? Like we were isolated, we can move about and stuff, but was it better for certain people? Yes and no.
I'm sad to leave the RHCB team because I've had the best boss ever, truly. And the bookmaking team truly loves what they do. But I couldn't be prouder to become part of Amistad's legacy, moving forward under the superb leadership of Tracy Sherrard, a great mentor. Starting Black History Month with some new job news. Next week, I'm joining Amistad Books as a senior editor. I'm so psyched to work with this fabulous group in the 35th anniversary year of an important HarperCollins imprint that's always centered Black writers. How excited were you when you found out that you were going to be joining Amistad?
I was excited, but it was also a hard decision, like you quoted, because I came from a very toxic workplace. I think I had mentioned to you when I was up at Columbia and I worked there, that's a very toxic working environment. There are a lot of great people at my old job there, but I was not happy and other people weren't happy either. So I went to a new job, and then 2 months later, there's a pandemic and we're locked down. But I had a great experience there, and it was stressful because of the pandemic, not because of the job. And then coming into Amistad, I knew how much more work that was going to be. Like I told you, I knew that I was going from a job where pretty much my day ended at 6 to a job where that was not going to happen unless I made it happen. And that's a big thing to decide you're going to take on. Like, I am going to be the person who is in charge of all of this, rather than I am a facet of making an editor's dream come true. Like, I am now the person spearheading a lot of stuff with a team that supports me. And I was ready for it. I'm capable of doing it.
Oh, you were born ready.
It's also like,
you were born ready.
Thank you. That's very kind. But it's a lot. It's how do you go from like, oh, this is a job where I can control it, and to a job like I can't control so much. So that was a hard decision to make.
Earlier, you briefly mentioned something about submissions. What type of literature are you interested in publishing?
I just want to be clear for everyone who's listening and watching. I do adult books, so please do not send me children's books. And people do this, and I'm like, I don't know why you're sending me a children's book. I do adult books. That could be read by young people, but primarily adults. So, and that, you had a question?
When you say they send you children's books, the writers are sending them to you directly, or is it?
No, they're agents. The agents who represent them are sending me.
The agents are not paying attention to what your wish list is?
Nahshon, I get stuff by white writers, even though Amistad is a Black imprint that has existed.
No, rewind.
I am not lying to you. From literary agents and from authors who I've never met in my life. Authors should not be email. If we don't have a relationship and I've never said, hey, send me something, do not email me. Do not email my personal account for sure. But yes, literary agents have literally sent me work by white people.
You mean to tell me that they're actually not paying attention to something that is so obvious?
That is everywhere. That is everywhere. Yeah.
Oh, wow. I wouldn't
Oh,
have
yeah,
expected that.
I'm not the only one. My boss has gotten it.
And you're not interested in erotica and epic fantasy and steampunk and coffee table novelty books and travel guides and sports and translation, so and so.
No.
You're not interested in trauma stories unless they're nuanced and balanced. Why is that? Explain why it's important for traumatic narratives to be balanced with nuance.
I think because, as I think you and I have spoken about in other forums, is that sometimes people just want to have these characters go through all these traumatic events, and they're not really building a story in which the reader can, I think, build empathy, but also an understanding of the person as a full human, right? It might just be everything bad has happened to me, and I just want you to know everything bad that has happened to me. Or it is me working through my own stuff, rather than someone saying, you know what, I have a story to tell, and I want to convey this story in a way that shows that I have not always been a victim. Like, I might have been victimized,
right,
but I'm not a victim, especially when we're people of color, we're Black, we're marginalized, we're queer, we're trans, we're disabled. It's like,
we're not professional victims.
Exactly. But let me tell you, those.
Well, I was one for a while. I was one for a while, but I had to move on.
I think we all have. Like, I know I did initially, until I had to think more about it and be like, because people would be like, why is everything happening to this woman? And she's like, got mugged, she had a miscarriage, her husband cheated. Like, what is going on in this story? And I was like, I thought things needed to happen. And I'm like, but what? Who is she? Is she just someone who everyone just smacks her around throughout the story? Like, what's the story? And that's my question to people, is like, well, what's the story? And I think it's hard when it's like, especially with memoir, when it's people's story. But there are so many good memoirs out there, like yours included, that really say, I want to tell you about a life, but a life that is not solely misery. Because who does that serve?
And we have to give a shout out to Misery, Kathy Bates. When she took that sledgehammer, when she kidnapped him, she took that sledgehammer and she disabled him. And wasn't he a writer? He was a writer, wasn't he?
He was a writer.
I love that scene. I just absolutely love that scene. So, submission guidelines. Amistad specifically accepts agented submissions unless otherwise solicited. Unsolicited submissions from authors will be deleted, unread, and email addresses will be.
You see, I set those boundaries. I tell you exactly what will happen.
Will be blocked. Are there ever any exceptions?
Not that I have received thus far.
Okay.
And let me tell you, most of them, again, are white people submitting to Amistad that I didn't ask for.
The majority of writers that submit to Amistad are white?
No. The majority of stuff I'm like, delete.
Oh, that's being sent to you.
Yeah. But not the majority of submissions that I or my boss have received. Those are mostly accurate. They're like Black or people of color. Like I am publishing also books by people of color for Amistad as well. And on occasion, if it's applicable, but really it should be like, if we're going to publish someone white, they really should partner with someone Black for the story. And it should make sense for what Amistad is doing as an imprint.
Well, I wanted to discuss some of your favorites, like Shaun of the Dead, Clerks, Insecure. These are some of your favorite film and TV books. And when you say I'd like next, do you mean like Erasure by Percival Everett? Do you mean you'd like another book like that?
Yeah, like in that vein, that is like Erasure is satire.
Oh, okay.
And it kind of makes fun of the elitism of the publishing industry and what is Blackness in books. So it's a very good book.
Okay. And so that's for all of those books that are mentioned.
Yeah, like it's a mix, like you said, it's TV, movies, and books. So like
Kindred,
Shaun of the Dead is
Butler.
Yeah, but it's like a humorous zombie movie that's very original and it's very character specific. And so I'm like, oh, that would be a cool book. Like, if someone chose to write that and they were people of color, Black. Yeah.
Okay, I see. And speaking of am I saying his name right? Percival Everett?
Percival Everett.
Oh, Percival Everett. Oh, wow. Percival Everett. Did you get a chance to read his book, The Trees?
Not the new one, no. I didn't get to read the new one.
He was nominated for a PEN Award, but
I saw.
yeah, I thought I was going to see you there, but you weren't there.
Actually, was there.
You were there?
Briefly, yeah. Yeah.
I was there to support Sarah.
Sarah, oh, Schulman.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I got a last minute media invite because they wanted to fill up seats.
And the place was empty.
Oh, really?
Did you sit downstairs or up in the balcony?
Downstairs.
Oh, okay. Yeah. February 19th, 2020, you wrote, last night on her 89th birthday, the Tonimorrison Festival took place to honor the one and only Miss Tonimorrison, Chloe Anthony Wofford. It was a multidisciplinary and multifaceted event organized with care and by Clavis Natira and Mahogany. And what's the last name? Do you know?
What do you have the
Makhene?
Oh, Mahogany McKinney.
Wow. They were awarded a Brooklyn citation for this event. There was dance, music, and words in abundance in her honor. And as a tribute, there was even cake. Such a joy and truly an honor. What kind of cake?
I believe it was vanilla.
To honor, to hold this time and space and to watch so many people I hold dear, hold Morrison dearly as well. They are truly reflections of where she saw the world going. So I attended Tony's memorial in Harlem, and you said you went, but you said you had to leave early right after. Yeah.
Yeah, I was teaching.
You're always leaving early.
So I'm telling you, I was like, I was a woman on the go.
You're a very busy person. And I was disappointed because we couldn't eat at Hungarian Pastry Shop, which you introduced me to when we first did our interview in July, August of 2016.
Yeah, because the line wrapped around right across the street from that, didn't it?
It did wrap around. I thought there was going to be way more people there. And it was my first time attending an event like that with a diverse group of older writers and publishing people like Errol McDonald. And I was excited and happy to hear, obviously, Oprah, Angela Davis, Ta-Nehisi Coates, and
Jasmine
Ward, and some of the musicians who I never heard of. I mean, you know, when I heard that, you know, they were doing the memorial and that it was open to the public and that, you know, Oprah and all those people were going to be there, I was just like, these tickets are free, like open to the public. I was just like,
I didn't think we were going to get in, honestly. Like when I happened to see a friend in line and she actually was like, come up here, but there was still space. Even if I had gotten to the end of the line, I still would have gotten in.
You still would have gotten in, yeah. Beautiful, beautiful service. So what was the first Morrison book that you read? And did Morrison influence you becoming a writer or editor?
Morrison did not influence me in that way because, again, I had always wanted to write. I didn't know about publishing until undergrad, but writing was something I wanted to do. Sula was the first book I read of hers. And I read it repeatedly because, did I read it in high school? I believe I read Sula in high school. And then I read it again in college. And then I read it again as an adult. And I just appreciated it more the more I read it. So that's my first book of hers. And then I would go and then I was reading the newer stuff because my mother also read Toni Morrison. So my mother was a big fan of Toni Morrison.
And what influenced you to become an editor?
I didn't want to teach. So I was in undergrad. I went to City College of New York. That's where I got a full scholarship. And I majored in English. And the primary thing people were saying was, oh, if you major in English, this was 2003 when I graduated, you were going to be a teacher. And I said, I don't want to be a teacher. I don't want to teach. And funny enough, I teach now on top of my day job and writing and all that stuff. But I was like, no, but like teach in public schools or teach like children and stuff like that. Like, and so I was like, I don't really want to do that. And so someone, David Unger, who does this City College Publishing Certificate Program, that really caters to putting people of color in publishing jobs, or at least introducing them to the possibility and helping them learn a bit more about it, said, well, why don't you do this program? This was before I graduated. So I did that program and was able to get a few internships, and then got a couple jobs soon after I graduated college. So I was very lucky, again, that I had internships. I had a summer internship after I graduated, and then I was able to get a full-time job soon after, and that was 2003.
Matter of fact, during our podcast interview, we discussed the importance of internships. I remember that.
Yeah. I mean, they're still important to this day, but also it really helps to just know people.
Oh, definitely. And you, are you still teaching at the Bay Path University? Are you still there?
Yes, I am. We're on spring break, but I still got to work. And so, because I got to grade papers.
This is a quote from you. I'm eager to engage with the concrete community over the course of the semester. I feel like the dynamics in a workshop can build a firm sense of approach for not only participants, but for the ones leading discussion and critique. Instructors learn so much from students in workshops that it becomes a very reciprocal space for the exchange of ideas. What's your experience been like as a instructor teaching?
For Bay Path specifically?
I guess, well, yeah.
Okay.
You're only there, right?
Currently, but I have led workshops and
you've done workshops,
sometimes one-off and stuff like that. But this is the first time I'm like adjunct faculty.
What's it like?
Yeah, it's a low res MFA and it's all virtual. So their MFA in creative nonfiction specifically has always been online. So it didn't get affected in terms of that when COVID happened, because they just kind of took the structure that they already had. I think for me, I really like doing workshops with people, but it's different when there's a syllabus, and it's very different when it's online. And so it's just, I think the workshop environment is one I would lean more towards, because I'm actively helping people with their writing in real time. Whereas with like a course, you are doing that, but you're doing that in very different ways. And for me, I enjoy Bay Path. Everyone's very sweet. It's also an older community for the most part. Like there are people who are like straight out of undergrad, so in their 20s, but mostly it's people who are older, really trying to get into writing. And it's just kind of hard because it's online. I think that's my critique, is that it's like hard to really engage in a real way if we're not online actively, but really the student body cares, faculty cares, the university is trying.
Sarah was saying the same thing, that it was difficult to teach. It's difficult to teach online. It's difficult. It's especially if you're not used to it.
Yeah, I'm used to teaching online, but again, I'm used to doing workshops where it's like, we're going to be discussing some writing, but we're going to be discussing these two people's work. And then the next time we meet, we discuss these two people's work. And then the next time we meet, we discuss these two people's work. And then we're doing exercises in the midst of that, versus, okay, we read something this week. What did everyone think? Okay, we read something else this week. What did everyone think? And people, there's different levels of engagement, you know? So, yeah. But I do enjoy teaching, but it's something I definitely couldn't do full time. I don't think I can do this full time.
Oh, you said you couldn't do it full time?
Yeah, I don't think I would prefer to teach full time. I think part time or on occasion is good.
Prior to the pandemic, several unarmed African Americans have been killed by the police. Ronald Green, Elijah McClain, Atiana Kokese Jefferson, and Breonna Taylor. And Ahmaud Arbery was the victim of a hate crime that was initially covered up and not prosecuted. During the pandemic, several more unarmed African Americans were killed by the police: George Floyd, David McCatty, and Rayshard Brooks. It took a global pandemic and the killing of unarmed Black folks for the world to stop turning a blind eye to racial terrorism and state-sanctioned violence, and for some of our issues to be addressed. How do you feel about those events and the events afterward?
It's kind of hard to articulate, mainly because these are not new events and these have been going on for so long. And I think the biggest thing for me, especially in terms of my online personality, which does reflect my actual personality, is I never want to have violence reflected on my timeline. So you will never see me repost videos. Like even now with the Ukraine attack, like people are calling it a war. And I'm like, I feel like wars involve two parties. This was an invasion. So you will not see me share photos of blown up buildings or anything like that. I just wish people would do something. Like you said in the beginning, where it's like, and let's move forward. And I feel like we're constantly in the stasis of people saying they care, they feel horrible. Oh, but now that I'm home, now that I have to process it. But then literally, like, again, I would go to work the next day and we're all working. You know what I mean? So I just feel like if people care, you don't have to live with trauma every day and every second of your life. But there are ways that we can do things that I just wish people would do it, or just be upfront and say, you don't care. Just be upfront. Like, you don't care about these deaths, make you feel bad, and then you move on because your life is pretty comfortable.
You're not affected.
And you just don't care. So I just think there's like a level of continual frustration, and that adds to the stress that I told you about earlier of the pandemic. You know, where are my outlets to go for these things? And it used to be hanging out or being around book people and stuff like that. And it's not so much that anymore. So it takes a toll.
You said you were hanging out?
Yeah, like pre-pandemic, it would be, I'm at an event. I'm, you know, going to dinner. I'm maybe preparing for a presentation. So I'm in another state. So I can see a different, you know, landscape or whatever. And I'm like, I have not done that in about 2 years. But I've just been working. And as that is working, as my therapist says, a way for me to just have to not think about the real world. And maybe that is part of why I overwork, is so I don't have to think about the things that bother me.
Yeah, that's understandable. So in the wake of the George Floyd protests, Americans overwhelmingly turned to reading and purchasing books by Black authors. And since the pandemic started, and after George Floyd's murder, writers started using the hashtag publishing paid me, and to address racial disparities in pay in the publishing industry. BIPOC writers and voices have been receiving a great deal of support and have received book deals, some several. Do you believe the current wave of support and attention we're receiving will continue for a while or is needed? Or will it soon be gone with the wind, like our 1865 Special Field Order Number 15 promise of 40 acres and a mule?
I think we're gonna start to see what happens, because that was 2020, right? All that. So the publishing paid me and all that. And then you see certain repercussions.
June of 2020.
Yeah. So you see certain repercussions when they started hiring a lot more, or giving people money to be able to hire the staff they wanted. And they've been, for the most part, actively hiring more Black people in and out of the industry. So now that we're acquiring books, I think we're gonna see what this looks like come 2023 and 2024. Because like when those books come out from all those mass hires and all that reactionary way of thinking from the industry, you're gonna see, oh, did these books sell well? Did those books earn out? Did we pay a big advance for it? Did it do that? And that's what internally we're looking at. We're looking at, how is the support that they supposedly gave to us going to actually come to fruition in those books that come out in 2023 and 2024? Like, what editors are going to be able to know what to do to get that support, or what editors overpaid? So there's a whole technical thing I won't get into for the sake of brevity. But I think we're just going to, I'm like, a lot of us are waiting to see how these books do and how the acquisitions from all these hires do, to see if publishing is going to be like, yes, we're going to stick with this for a while or not, because they have had trends where, you know, in the 90s, they saw that Terry McMillan was doing well. This was before she had a major publisher. They saw, you know, people, Elin Harris's and the Zanes, like they weren't really paying attention to them. And then they blew up, and then they're like, oh crap, what, we need to get in on this. And then they stopped knowing what to do with them as from a promotional standpoint, because they weren't having the staff to support these authors. And then, those certain people keep blowing up, but then the other people's fell off. And so there was a lot of fires, like people got laid off in the 90s, and also 2008, a lot of people got laid off too, because of the big financial crisis before Obama was elected. So we'll see.
I'm happy that I asked that question, because you gave me much more that I was expecting to hear. So that's great, because the years ahead. And so are we talking about several hundred books, nonfiction and fiction, or are we just talking about maybe 100?
I'd say we're seeing dozens. Saying dozens, because they're all going to be, like, if I acquire a book now, it really isn't probably going to be ready until 2024. Unless the book is very clean and is something I feel like we can get out very quickly. So for people who are listening, like, if you sold a book, whether it was a full manuscript or a proposal, like, usually it's about 2 years out before you'll actually see the book on like bookshelves. It's like 9 months for us to produce it in terms of it being copy edited, proofread, all that stuff, typeset. But a year or so, depending on what the book is, we're working on it together in terms of the developmental process. And so that's part of why, when we see what happened in 2020 and 2021 in terms of these hires, like, the industry is going to expect us to perform. Like, they gave us money, they gave us a job. Did they give us full support? I don't know. Like, because it becomes more stuff, because it's like, I can't edit, market, publicize, design a book myself. I can't do that.
Right.
I need help. And supposedly I have that help to do it, but not everyone does. And if they're just hiring the editors, but not the marketers, the publicists, the designers, then you're kind of setting us up to fail.
Okay. I want to move forward.
Yep.
In March of 2021, my nonfiction book proposal was completed, and you read it and you said the proposal was really good and thorough, and that it was one of the best ones that you had seen at Amistad since you had been there. And you also said that Todd definitely did wonders, as did you, of course, that it should really make any agent's job easier to share what you produced. And you said that Todd should get a commission.
Did I?
Yeah, you did. Yeah, you did.
Okay.
Todd is awesome. Todd is a magician. We'll just leave it at that. So, are some writers given book deals without book proposals? And how important is a book proposal?
Oh, book proposal is crucial. It's very, very, very important. But let's be clear, book proposals are really for nonfiction. People should not be submitting a book of fiction on proposal. We want to see the full book, because any book can change, but buying a novel on proposal is not ideal. I would never buy a short story collection on proposal unless we already had a deal in place where we've worked together, and then you're just kind of like saying, hey, I want to continue to work together. Here's what I've been working on. Those are instances. But to your question, proposals should be very, very tight, like I told you Todd's was, but they do, like, particularly celebrities. I will be very honest. Like, I've seen celebrity proposals that have been like 6 pages and they sold. Because people are kind of banking on
name recognition.
Who the person is, like, they're following. But I would not recommend this to someone who is not a celebrity at all. I don't recommend it for celebrities either, but I definitely, like, if you are not someone who is on TV and movies or won a Grammy or whatever, you should really have, like, I say minimum 30 to 40 pages of a proposal, and make sure to have, I would prefer 2 sample chapters or essays or whatever, but some people only have the 1, but it should be preferably more than 10 pages, the sample writing, not just the proposal. The proposal, I think, should be upwards of 30 pages, but your sample writing definitely has to be more than 10, because I've absolutely rejected. I've told agents, I was like, I am not going to buy a book by someone with no sample writing, and those books have sold, and some have sold for very good money. I can't say which ones, because out of, like, respect for that person, but that's happened. Like, books I rejected because very little sample material, other people have bought. So
Do you have any advice for writers to write excellent book proposals?
Hire a Todd if you're not up for it yourself.
No.
Because it's hard. Like, it's a hard thing to do, like to just get
Todd is
your
gonna
work.
Todd is gonna love the shout out because he's gonna love that. So
I also can recommend another, Emmy Akanda. She is a former editor at 3 different publishing houses, has a great track record. She is now an editor, a freelance editor. Her name's Emi Akanda, Ikkanda. Like, hire her. She can help you with your proposals. They need to be different. They need to be unique. And Nahshon, that's the thing. Your story is yours. Your story is unique. And it's not to say everyone's story isn't unique, but sometimes the way people talk about it, it's like, I've read this before. So really, if your book is about, unfortunately, something bad that happened to you, recognize that there are a lot of books out there. And what is your book going to do to stand out? Or if you're writing about your mother or writing about stuff, like, a lot of books exist about people writing about their mothers. So think about that. Like, how are you presenting it?
Not mother. So in June of last year, I hosted a 50th birthday celebration for Tupac Shakur. A reading of his poetry book, The Rose That Grew from Concrete. You participated and read the foreword written by Nikki Giovanni and his poems, What a Fame, Tears from a Star, and Family Tree. Are you a fan of hip hop, and what effect did Tupac have on your life, if any?
I am a fan of hip hop. I grew up with it. I was a big fan of hip hop, R&B, and pop, I guess, but sometimes the R&B artists fall into the pop category, and alternative music when I was a teenager. So I'm big into it. I don't know that Tupac directly had an effect on me. I think I learned even more about him after he passed away, because you think about the legacy of a person, and I was older to really kind of be like, I really loved his acting. I thought he was a really good actor, and he could have had such a great acting career.
Jen, for the first time, I just saw that movie that he was in.
Which one?
It was the first one. It was based in the Bronx, I think.
Juice?
Yes.
Omar Epps and the 4 friends.
Yeah. Somebody gets pushed off of a roof.
Yeah. And there's a gun and all that stuff. He was really good in that.
He was.
And it's a good movie, Juice. He was a good actor. Like, not a lot of rappers turned actors are good actors, but he was a good actor.
He was, yeah. Do you listen to hip hop now? Any rappers, or do you care for the music?
Yeah, yes and no.
Right.
Even then, I was I was really big. Forgive me, I'm an East Coaster, but I was big in the West Coast people.
Oh.
I really like Dre and Snoop.
Another Dre day.
Yeah, I was a bit more into. I didn't like Suge Knight. I couldn't stand that guy, but I kind of preferred the West Coast rappers to the East Coast. And then also, I learned more about the Southern rappers later on. So yeah, and nowadays I really love what's his name? Kendrick Lamar. I love the Black Panther soundtrack. I love the Spider-Man Into the Universe, which is very hip hop based. But in terms of the group, I'm so out of date and out of touch with current musicians. I'm really out of date with them. Sometimes I'm like, I don't really care.
Gonna move forward. So this is a quote. Photo by Alice Wong of me ecstatic and joyous to be holding her new anthology, Disability Visibility, out now from Vintage Books. Add this book to my fave pile of 2020. The curation of these essays is masterful and each one packs a punch. Brilliant, heartfelt, exploratory. I highly recommend you get this book ASAP and teach it widely too. Besides being an advocate for BI, POC, and LGBT writers, you're also a disability advocate. I've had an invisible disability for over 2 decades. Disability issues are very important to me. What makes you pick up the torch for the disabled community?
That's very kind of you. I don't know that I'm qualified to be called a disability advocate. I think I just really listen to people in the community and try to be better, because I've done and said ableist things that I did not know were that. And I don't want to do that ever again. And I just want to be better. And so I rely a lot on people in the community who are kind enough to just be out there about what the issues are. And Alice Wong is an amazing person who does that. And there's so many people like Essie Smith and, like Kia Brown, and there's so many people. And then there are others who do have, like you mentioned, an invisible disability who are doing that work, but we may not know they deal with disability.
Right.
So I just sit here as someone who has a lot of privilege, who just knows that I think my job is just to learn and do better and to amplify other people.
Okay. So I'm going to read another quote. I don't take it lightly when someone shares their work with me and what it takes to get to that point to share it with the world. So I'm incredibly grateful to the authors I get to work with on 13 books total after 11 months at Amistad. Thank you to all the BIPOC and/or FEM women identified authors who shared your visions with me. Can't wait to see the final product. I'm from Southern California, Altadena and Pasadena, home to the writer Octavia Butler. You are currently editing Positive Obsession, The Life and Times of Octavia Butler, written by Susanna Morris.
Yes, Dr. Morris.
Dr. Morris, by Dr. Morris. Butler wrote, "My books will be read by millions of people, so be it. See to it. We too deserve success, joy, pleasure, ease, and rest. Don't be afraid to name and claim your desires. You deserve." When did you first read Butler?
Sadly, after she passed. I had always known about Octavia Butler. I had always known about Octavia Butler. I just didn't get to read her work, especially in school. I was reading a lot. I went to undergrad and grad school. I just wasn't reading her work. It wasn't assigned in my class. I wish it was. So after she passed away in the early 2000s, I finally was able to just make a point to read Kindred. And I love that book. It's just one of my favorite books ever. I've read her short story collection. I have it here. I read the first parable in the series, and I have various other books. And then I have the graphic novel of Kindred, which I also recommend the graphic novel because it really is close to the original. And I just loved it. I just loved it. And I was just so pissed at myself because I was like, damn, I could have been at an event or probably been in her presence and learned from her while she was here. And I didn't, but at least we have her work.
In the parable series, Octavia created the Earthseed philosophy. Earthseed's main tenet is that God is change. Consider whether you're a human being, an insect, a microbe, or a stone. This verse is true. All that you touch, you change. All that you change changes you. The only lasting truth is change. God is change. How do you feel about that powerful statement?
I think she knew what the hell she was talking about. like change is powerful, but change is really hard. And change, I feel like change is of a higher power at times. Like it's in us as individuals, but it is such a collective vision. I don't know if you feel similarly in that way, but yeah, I agree with a lot of what she says, especially in that quote that you.
Beautiful, very beautiful quote. Very beautiful quote. So Butler was recently named one of the women inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame as part of the class of 2021. NASA named the landing site, the Perseverance rover in Jezreel Crater on Mars, the Octavia E. Butler landing in her honor this year. Washington STEAM Multilingual Academy in Pasadena was renamed the Octavia E. Butler Magnet in honor of her. She attended the school and graduated in 1961. The motion was passed, approved, and adopted unanimously this year at a special meeting by the Pasadena Unified School District. I'm going to read a quote. Octavia Butler is a role model for our students, and she exemplifies the qualities of a graduate of the Pasadena Unified School District as presented by the PUSD graduate profile. Coming from a meager background, she persisted through struggling with a learning disability to a model of excellence, using skills such as creativity, critical thinking, collaboration, self-discipline, research, goal setting, and resilience. On so many levels, I can identify with Butler. Can you?
Oh yeah. She was dedicated. She was dedicated to do it. I don't know if you read her short story collection that also has some essays where she details how she really was about writing, and she did jobs she hated. because she just knew she was a writer.
Dawn is currently being adapted for television by producer Ava DuVernay, marking the first time Butler's work has been adapted for television. Butler's book Wild Seed is also being adapted into a TV series for Amazon Prime Video, and FX ordered a pilot for a potential television series based on Kindred, which was initially rejected 15 times by the publisher. That screenplay is going to be written by Brandon Jacobs Jenkins. That's a tongue twister, Jacobs Jenkins. And so are you surprised that Butler's receiving this amount of long overdue attention and praise?
No, because it's like what we said when 2020 arrived. I'm sure people were like, wow. And her book, Parable, it hit the New York Times bestseller list. Didn't it? If not 2020, 2021. And then everyone was like, oh, she finally became the New York Times bestseller that she prophesied herself to be, because everyone was freaking out and being like, she saw this, like this pandemic stuff. And I'm sure, like we know, I'm sure so many people were trying to get these books adapted for decades. While she was alive, I'm sure they were trying to get these things happen. And then suddenly the doors open when people are like, wow, Black people really, we should support Black people. Oh my God.
They're really humans. They're not aliens.
Right. Like they might, buy this.
They have feelings.
Yeah. Like look at Jordan Peele. Jordan Peele won an Oscar. Like we should do this.
Oh my God. They're not striving to be white. So Butler had said something or had written something, and it was people were saying that she had prophesized Trump's presidency or something, or I think there was a quote she had.
I remember there was something like that. Yeah.
I don't have it. I didn't.
Yeah, I remember. I vaguely remember that, and Margaret Atwood. People were saying, "Oh, Margaret Atwood's *Handmaid's Tale* is going to come to reality too."
Yeah. So Butler maintained a long-standing relationship with the Huntington Library, the beautiful Huntington Library in Pasadena, and she bequeathed her papers, including manuscripts, correspondence, school papers, notebooks, photographs, to the library in her will. The collection, comprising 9,062 pieces in 386 boxes, 1 volume, 2 binders, and 18 broadsides, was made available to scholars and researchers in 2010. Well, in 2000. In 2010. As editor of Butler's biography, do you have plans to visit her archives at the Huntington?
I personally do not, but I believe Dr. Morris does.
That's up to the, that's the writer.
I would love to visit them, but I'm also not writing the book.
right, of course, right.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. Embrace diversity, unite or be divided, robbed, ruled, killed by those who see you as prey. Embrace diversity or be destroyed. From Earthseed, the books of the living, Parable of the Sower. Do you think our society is being destroyed because the majority have yet to embrace diversity?
Oh yeah, equality in general. Like Nahshon, could you imagine how different this world would be if everyone had access to the resources they needed? Like it would just, capitalism reigns, and capitalism is in itself racist, misogynist, ableist, all that, like anti this, anti that, anti LGBTQIA. But people would, if people had what they needed, they could buy things, like if you didn't have to worry about whether all your needs, your basic needs were taken care of, wouldn't you have access potentially? Maybe not. I don't know. It depends on the individual. Wouldn't you spend money on things? Like, right. Oh, I don't have to worry about rent. I don't have to worry about whether, I can go to the doctor, I can afford glasses, I can get, like, do I have to go to an ER or da-da-da-da-da? I can get what I need. And yeah, I'll go to a movie. I'll buy a purse. I'll go to a nice dinner. I'll go to a show and da-da-da-da-da. Like, just imagine. And I understand why we're not there yet because of history, but I just don't understand why we don't recognize that if everybody had basic needs, not excess, like just the bare minimum of what we all needed, everybody. Like
I guess that's why there's a lot of cities are starting to roll out the guaranteed income programs, as they are in New York doing that with, I think, a few hundred people, $1,000 a month. But I want to go into something real quick. Yeah, New York set aside Well, it's 125 million, but that 125 million is not all for the guaranteed income. It's only a certain amount. But you said this 16 hours ago. And I lurk on your social media occasionally. Oh, you said this 16 hours, well, probably 20 hours ago. This hashtag work culture, share data, information, and look out for one another, not just yourself. Capitalism is built on isolation, status quo, and fear, among other things. And we're starting to see that fear manifest much more with all of the violence.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So for those who've never read Butler, wait, you mentioned, did you say, you said Kindred, right? You mentioned that.
Kindred was the first book of hers I read, yes.
And you said if you had a recommendation, would you recommend Kindred for people to read?
Yes, but I would also very highly recommend her story collection that was published. I forget the name, it's Blood something, I could look it up. But it was published by Seven Stories Press.
Seven Stories Press?
Yeah.
I'm rereading one of my favorite books of all time by my favorite author of all time, since my Center for Fiction reading group on the Harlem Renaissance starts tomorrow. I swear the structure, sentences, layout is all perfection here, and this seminal work is the reason Hurston remains a staple in the literary canon. If you haven't read Dust Tracks on the Road, I will stare at you agog while urging you to do so immediately. How did you discover Zora? And what other books of hers do you enjoy?
I discovered her in high school also. She was assigned Their Eyes Were Watching God, the book that most people are introduced to when it comes to Hurston. Mm-hmm. And it was after graduate school that I read more of her stuff, like Dust Tracks on a Road and her story collections and stuff like that. And Amistad basically is the home of Zora Neale Hurston. So they work with her. Tracy, my boss, works with the estate, and they continually look out for her stuff, whether there's new materials or new ways to package what exists out there. Mm-hmm. And I just love her writing. I just think, like you said in the quote, like her writing is amazing. Like it's to the point. She keeps it short. Mm-hmm. She's just phenomenal. Her, Octavia Butler, Tony, like they're good at economy. They're really good at economy.
And who?
Economy, like economy of words.
Uh-huh. One of Zora's quotes, yes. Mm-hmm. So, I do not share the gloomy thought that Negroes in America are doomed to be stomped out bodaciously, nor even shackled to the bottom of things. Of course, some of them will be tromped out, and some will always be at the bottom, keeping company with other bottom folks. It would be against all nature for all the Negroes to be either at the bottom, top, or in between. It has never happened with anybody else, so why with us? Damn Zora, damn Zora, damn Zora. I was like, just, I don't know. Keeping it real. Nobody wants to be on the bottom. I mean, nobody wants to be on the bottom. It hurts. It hurts. It's an ugly place. So, on October the 3rd, as part of the Brooklyn Book Festival, the Schomburg Center presented The Enduring Legacies of Amistad Books and Zora Neale Hurston. What do Amistad Books and Zora Neale Hurston have in common? They both help to broaden the narrative landscape of the African diaspora. Amistad's Tracy Sherrard, Vice President and Editorial Director, and you and the author, journalist Herb Boyd, and Lucy Ann Hurston, sociologist and niece of Zora Neale, conversed about the influence of Amistad's 35 plus years dedicated to developing extraordinary work by Black authors and their latest efforts to connect new audiences to popular and lesser known work for the acclaimed author, anthropologist, and folklorist Zora Neale Hurston. After attending that event, I learned much more about the publishing business and African-American literature than I felt like I had in the past decade. And really? Yeah, yes. And that was the perfect way to spend a Sunday afternoon, a Sunday evening, other than grant writing, which I've taken a break from. So, yeah. Mm-hmm. And then that's when I purchased, well, because Tracy had mentioned, she mentioned that was an excellent memoir, Dust Tracks on a Road. And so that's when I ran out and purchased it.
Yeah. And keep in mind also that Zora isn't totally honest about everything in Dust Tracks of the Road. As in, she doesn't talk about everything in her life.
She embellishes a little bit.
She leaves stuff out. So
Oh,
if you read that and then you read other scholars who did a lot of work on her work, you'd be like, oh, she totally didn't talk about that marriage.
She liked to edit things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm sure she had her reasons, right?
Of course.
Yeah, we all do.
Yes. Yes.
And we had that right to, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
That's the privilege of being the writer.
Yeah, economy of words, just like I was saying. Like,
tell your own story before somebody else does, because they will if they can.
Mm-hmm.
They're waiting. People are waiting in corners and lurking to tell other people's stories. And they do that because they're not that creative. And I'm gonna leave it at that.
Mm-hmm.
So after attending, this is another quote from you. Well, my summer presentation on the book acquisitions process was so popular, I'm doing it again and again. Both events are free to the public and virtual. Next Thursday, October 21st, 6:30, I'll be doing a 1-hour presentation for Black Creators HQ. On Wednesday, November 3rd, I'm doing another online presentation for Authors Guild. Always happy to shed more light on the internal process of publishing, because authors definitely deserve to know how the business side works and why we may not be acquiring your work and the steps for us to do so. Feel free to spread the word. Your YA novel, Forgive Me Not, will publish with Putnambooks for young readers, Penguin Random House in 2022. Although you're acquiring books now, you've acquired 13. What was, and you briefly mentioned this in the very beginning, and I wasn't to wait. What was the acquisition process like for your book? And what has the overall experience been like for you?
The acquisitions process was very quick for me, as in my agent submitted my book on a Monday, and the following Thursday, I got a formal offer that I accepted. So that's quick. That is not usually how it happens in publishing. And that's part of why I did the book acquisition process, to show the range of how fast you could sell a book, or it could take a while to sell a book. For instance, there's a book I had for almost 2 months that I just hadn't read, that I am like now pursuing. And so, someone might think, oh, this person isn't interested after a month or something. I just didn't get to read it. I just said, today's the day I'm going to sit here and read it. And then I was like, oh, it's good. And then I met with the author and stuff like that. So just to keep it very brief in terms of the acquisition, I would absolutely truncate it for your listeners. Mm-hmm. It's like, you send out a book, your agent sends out a book to multiple editors or one or whatever. And then an editor might say, I'm interested. I would like to set up a meeting. And so then you and the editor meet, the author and the editor meet. And then they're getting a feel for you, and you're getting a feel for them. So it's mutual. It's not just me trying to be like, are you worthy? It's not that. It's really like, I want to get to see, like, hear about what you want to do with your book, why you wrote the book. I want to get a sense of like who your community is, who we can potentially sell this book to, who we can help collaborate with. And then you ask me about what I'm going to do for your book, or how I see the editing process and all that stuff. And then after that, I go to people internally, and I need to do paperwork and memos and approvals, and I have to present your book to show them that I want to pursue this book, and this is how much I would like to pay for it, and this is how much I think, how many copies I think it will sell. This is when, like, I'm telling them all these things to get them to sign off on me being able to make an offer to you. And then when I have those approvals, I come to you or your agent. Really, I don't usually go to the authors directly. You really want an agent to be part of this, because legal stuff happens. And then say, this is my offer, and you can accept it, you could reject it, or you could counter. And counter means you can ask for more money. Mm-hmm. And I can give that to you, or I can't. But again, I have to go back to people to approve that, and then come back and say yes or no, or are we going to do this, or whatever, or are there terms that we can do upfront before we enter a formal contract. And so again, that could take weeks. It could take a couple months. It could take days. It all depends. But mine literally took 9 business days to happen.
What did they say? The planets were aligned?
I mean, the editor is a very well-respected person of color that I wanted a person of color. I wanted to work with a person of color. That was very important to me. I wanted to work with the best editor for the book who had the best vision, but it was very, very important to me. And I told my agent, I said, please prioritize editors of color first. Because I thought if they all reject it, then I did something wrong.
But you throwing your weight around.
Yeah, I was just like, but that's what authors should do. I also say that in the acquisitions process, like you should know who your agent is sending your book to. It shouldn't be, and then this is another episode to talk about, but I've talked to people of color who were like, oh, I didn't know who my agent sent to, or it was all Black people, like it was all white people they sent to, or it was like 2 Black people when there are so many more editors than 2 Black. Like Tracy and Chris Jackson are not the only Black editors in all of book publishing. No. They're even before the hiring of more Black people in 2021. There were many other Black editors or editors of color. So if you as an author, right? Like Todd Hunter was there before he left Atria. Like there's so many people, Chelsea Johns, like Errol Moore, like you said, Errol McDonald, and like Rakia Clark, and that's just the adult side, like Nicole Counts and Amber Oliver, and they're like people, Sarah Reed, so many people. So if you're sitting here like I don't know any Black editors, you aren't trying. You aren't trying.
Over the past 2 years, some folks' mental health has declined. We've seen a lot of unusual, reckless, and very foul behavior. Folks are proudly showing their colors. You still want that Rona Jaffe nomination and that MacArthur phone call, right?
I can't get a Rona Jaffe.
Okay, well, you still want that MacArthur.
But a MacArthur would be great. Okay. MacArthur would be. I'm not eligible for a Rona Jaffe anymore, but a MacArthur would be wonderful.
Oh, well, look at you. How do you remain professional and not offend others when folks rub you the wrong way or show their true colors? Do you worry about the cancel culture and how has it impacted and how it has impacted and ruined and is ruining folks' lives?
I don't believe in cancel culture. And I think I'm at a place, again, I have a therapy appointment tomorrow. I think I am at a place where when people confront me on things and I did do something wrong, that I hope I would be at a place where I'm like, oh, wow, I need to think about that versus be defensive, which is what I have done and many people do. So I'm not worried so much about that. Like I would be worried, it's like, oh crap, I did something offensive, but I would also know how to respond to that. How people take that response is up to them, but I need to show that I'm being genuine. But I don't believe in cancel culture because a lot of those people who were canceled still got jobs. Like when Kevin Hart was like, oh, I got canceled. He didn't get canceled. He is still the highest paid comic. He still has 100-something million followers on it. He didn't do the Oscars. That's it.
Right.
He didn't do the Oscars. He was not canceled. He is on my TV every day in a commercial for SiriusXM, Chase Bank.
What's his name? What's his name?
Kevin Hart, the comedian.
No, yeah, him, but the other one.
Chappelle.
Chappelle, yeah, Chappelle. I couldn't think of Chappelle. Yeah,
and he was canceled, but then the Netflix thing.
It's so annoying to me. It's so annoying to me that you have all these haters and these vindictive and these jealous and these envious people who are in powerless positions, but they will speak out and use their voice and their Twitter thumbs to activate, a situation where they can inject themselves into it and make it about them and get some press off of somebody else's name. These people are not committing war crimes. They're not committing crimes against children. If you are that offended by what somebody said, you should turn the fucking channel off and go mind your business. We are adults. We are adults. I have heard it all. The only thing that would possibly offend me, it's not words, it's gunshots. It's gunshots. People are too sensitive.
You lived a certain life, like, yeah, you prioritize and recognize certain things.
People are too fucking sensitive, and they do. They need to grow some. The pandemic and social unrest that started in 2020 has altered our lives in unimaginable ways, to the point where some decide to no longer live. In the future, do you think we'll see more problem narratives and trauma porn published, or the opposite, more books based on healing, health, and mental health issues?
I think we'll still see both. Honestly, I think we'll still see both because we need people's stories are their stories, but I don't think the ones that are kind of what some of us and others might not feel are just trauma for the sake of trauma and not really a full fleshed out narrative. I think those might still exist, but hopefully they're helping people in a way. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. And so the state of the world is in a flux unlike any our generation has seen or experienced. Worldwide, allegedly over 6 million have died from COVID-19, and allegedly over 961,000 Americans have died from COVID. Collectively, our society has become much more fragile and vulnerable and aware of our mortality. Still, it has not stopped folks from being hateful and cruel as we are witnessing the devastation and racism in Ukraine. Millions are struggling and suffering, and many are becoming numb. How do you manage your inner energy and workload and not become overwhelmed with grief or paralyzed with fear? What steps do you take to ensure your joy and harmony?
I think we also established that I tend to overwork as a way to like not have to deal with things, which again will be an interesting talk with my therapist tomorrow. But I think the biggest thing is having community and doing things for other people. And I do I do shopping therapy. You know, like sometimes I'll go to Sephora and get, you know, like those, I'm gonna get the nice moisturizers, I'm gonna get the nice face masks, I'm gonna get the fancy, you know, lip gloss.
Your massages.
Yeah, I haven't got one since my birthday, so I need to do that.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Roller skate, you know, like there's certain things I just really like to do, but sometimes it brings on more responsibility. Like,
and you bake,
know, like roller skating sometimes.
And you bake a lot.
I don't bake as much. I do eat sugar, but I haven't baked.
Oh, you haven't in a while? Oh, okay. No,
because I don't go in the office, so I can't share them. So I would be stuck with big pans and cakes and,
okay. And too many calories.
I can't have that in my apartment.
I don't blame you. I don't blame you. I don't blame you. So in a recent podcast interview, you said, and then there's the assumption that just because, like for me, it's minorities in publishing, I become a one-stop shop for a lot of people because they're like, oh, well, you talk to people who are marginalized. Though that does not stop the publishers from sending me cis-abled white men, you further stated, I'm just saying, how, Jenny? Our names, the names of our podcast alone should filter this crap out. And yet, so obviously, do you recall that conversation, that podcast?
I don't know what episode it was, but I'm sure I've said it on multiple episodes.
My thing was, you know, you can do me a favor and you can send those white men my way. I'll interview them and deal with them. But I think, that was for your—
You sure?
I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
I would only send you solid people. I would not send you any of the stuff that I've got.
So you also mentioned that at this particular point in time, you're not interested in reading about slaves. Do you think that could change in the future? Ironically or not,
with you bringing that up, one of the books that I am pursuing has a sliver of it in the book, but it is not a book about, but it just has a sliver of it in a bigger narrative about a family. So, but I do maintain that I am not particularly interested in books that from start to finish, it is about slavery. I think if slavery is a small part, yes, I can do it. But if it's just front to back, I can't. Right now, I can't.
Okay. Is that fiction or nonfiction?
Fiction primarily. I don't really know too many people submitting stuff about slavery at this point. Mm-hmm. Because it's too overwritten about. So the book, if they did write about slavery, it would have to be.
It really is. It really is that. So at Morrison's memorial, Angela Davis mentioned that it's artists and writers' responsibility to produce profound shifts in consciousness. Do you believe that? Do you believe that it's our goal? Do you believe that's your goal with your literature?
To promote different levels of consciousness. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, I try. I don't know if I succeed, but you know, Everyday People, I think, did that. And I didn't write Everyday People, I just curated it and edited stuff. But I really think Everyday People bring something to the table that allows people to think differently about marginalized communities. And again, not kind of look at them in a solely traumatic landscape.
You're an advocate for BI, POC, and LGBT voices in disabled community. In 2019 Publisher Weekly interview, you were asked if you could say one thing to the heads of the big publishers in the US, what would you tell them? And your comment was, I would say, please truly and actively invest in retention and mentorship for marginalized people and education for everyone on staff. Every single person on staff on bias, awareness, racism, and the ways in which any of us can perpetuate harm, not just white people, every single one of us. Are you satisfied with the results of your advocacy, or is there more that the publishing community can do to diversify?
I don't think anything I've done. That's a good question and also a hard one, but I'm still gonna aim to be brief. I just don't know what I have done that has helped outside of if someone tells me I have helped them, right? So I don't know if a larger presence of mine has done that outside of those one-on-one or whatever contacts when people say, hey.
Wouldn't you say you've pushed the dialogue forward?
I think a lot of us have. I think this Transbrations does that. I think what people who have been in publishing years before me have been doing, have been continually asking for that. And I'm just an additional person who's asking the same thing. I think the biggest thing that I can show is I set an example and maybe people want to follow it or maybe people don't. And that's an individual choice. But I just want to show people that the work needs to be done. We need to listen. And I'm not coming in here again as a victim. I'm not going to say I'm a Black woman and I am the worst treated person in this room at any given time. I'll be like, I can do everything that y'all have done because I've been educated by white people who have been anti-trans, anti-disabled, I have absorbed this my whole life in everything I have watched and what I have read and how I have been taught. So how can I sit here and say y'all are the problem and I'm not the problem? That's bull. That's bull.
And you told Harper to beat me.
I did.
You said you weren't playing the victim and stuff, and so I was just like, and you told Harper to beat me. So
I'm just like, listen, I would rather not work in this environment than just sit here and watch people be treated. I was like, I'm done with seeing people being treated in a different way, in a way that is just like unnecessary, that helps y'all, that helps keep the status quo.
Exactly.
I don't want to keep sitting here maintaining the status quo, but in a way I do, because I'm acquiring books, I'm working with authors, but I do need to speak out when things happen.
May I ask, are your authors, as far as the representation of gender, are they primarily female or female identifying, or like what's the gender?
Yeah, they're all, if not woman identified, femme identified. So they're not necessarily identifying as a woman, but they may be on the more femme side.
Well, actually, you did say that in that comment. You did say that the femme.
Yeah, I do not currently. I have not acquired to this date any books by cis or by anyone who is masculine or cis masculine specifically or anything like that. I do have like a non-binary author who identifies that way on my list, and mostly people who are femme, but like queer femme, like queer women, queer femmes, like non-binary. And I seek out more voices in that vein. I'm not anti-male or anti-masculinity. I just want to say that, but I do have a preference. I do lean towards that. And that's—
We all do have a preference, so that's—
Yes, we do.
And you have that right. So I want to move forward. This is a comment that you said. It's obvious shooting range is one of your contributions to the world. Of course, there are many, not just the book itself, but the amount of importance it has and how you've grown over the process of creating it shows a kind of dull need for the book to exist and for you to have it exist. Kind of cathartic, isn't it? Shooting Range isn't a traumatic story. It's a memoir that also expands on the anti-femme, anti-trans, anti-queer, and anti-Black sentiment that you continue to push against in your existence and storytelling and community. I'm sure you won't, but don't let anyone reduce this story to anything beyond it being about the full expression of your humanity. That's the most important thing. Speaking of books, you actually could write a book about your expertise in the grant game. You do have a knack for this that I know folks would pay to hear from. So thank you for being a guest on Transbrations. Thank you for your support. Thank you for spending your Saturday afternoon with me and discussing publishing and the state of the world and your life and how you're, managing through the pandemic. I appreciate your time and your support. And what's next for you? What is going on? You have your book is going to be published later this year?
Hopefully, yes. I will make sure to update you if anything changes.
Okay, if anything changes. My books will be read by millions of people. So be it, see to it. We too deserve success, joy, pleasure, ease, and rest. Don't be afraid to name and claim your desires. You deserve. Thank you, Jen.
You deserve. Thank you, Nahshon.